Is it a bold claim to say that Sandro Tonali is the best midfielder in England after Newcastle United's easy victory at the Carabao Cup last night? In this video, we're going to be discussing that, the other performances, and where Newcastle go in their cup defence from here. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. First of all, an apology for no preview of this game. It's been a really difficult week in terms of timings and I've had to put the YouTube channel on the back burner unfortunately this week, but we are back with a review and there will be player ratings on Patreon as well tonight. I know there weren't after the win over Fulham at the weekend, so apologies for that, but a huge victory for Newcastle last night, and I was struck by how comprehensive and easy the second half was. In particular, we're going to be talking all about that, but the main focus once again will be Sandro Tonali. I've got a big question which you already know I've asked in the intro. Is he the best midfielder in England? I think he is, and I'll talk about why. I thought Malik Thiaw was fantastic as well. I thought that there was a couple of other issues though in midfield which we'll also discuss. But before we get going, please do hit that like button and subscribe, and you can also join me, as I mentioned earlier, on Patreon for $2.99 a month as a supporter, or $4.99 a month after a free trial as a member. As a supporter, you get ad-free versions of these videos. As a member, you get extra content like player ratings, pitch-side previews, instant reactions from the ground as well, and your thoughts and mailbags, hopefully, when things really start to get going. So please do join me with the link in the description. But yeah, I think Tonali is the best midfielder in the country. I know Declan Rice has been absolutely phenomenal for Arsenal, and he is the key man for them this season with his set pieces. And I know that Moises Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez are fantastic players as well. And so, Ryan Gravenberch, Bruno Fernandes, all these players are in the conversation. But I honestly wouldn't trade Sandro Tonali for any of them. I think he has such an impact on Newcastle. And I would go so far to say that having him, Thiaw and Woltemade as the spine of the team really gives them a chance against anybody, because the structure of the team and the principles of the team lie with those three players. That's incredible to say about Malik Thiaw at such an early stage, but I think he's become that important. I think this is what carried Newcastle through last night, was having those three on the pitch, allowing them to play in the same way. And I think there were a couple of teething issues with the players around them. We'll talk more about Elanga, who was a little bit frustrating, and Barnes, again, frustrating. The midfield, I thought, didn't quite click as well, and that's why it was a little bit difficult in the first half. But overall, I think that those three players, as the foundation, give Newcastle a really strong position from which to build against most oppositions. I think that's ultimately what proved the difference in this game. I think there was a difficult spell after Newcastle went 1-0 up from Fabian Schär's header in the first half, where, again, the midfield, Willock and Ramsey, we'll touch on that in a second, but it didn't quite work. I think Spurs got through quite a lot. They got through down the left again against Dan Burn. Jed Spence, I thought, was really good defensively, but he also got forward a bit. There was a shanked cross in the first half, but I thought Spurs got through quite a bit. Lucas Bergvall had a decent game. If they had a better striker in Richarlison, they might have actually punished Newcastle in about 20 minutes in that first half. The second half, though, their decision making was generally poor up front throughout the entire evening. Xavi Simons, who we know I'm a huge fan of. I spoke so much about him in the summer, and he was one of my top targets for Newcastle, but he didn't do anything because I think Tonali was so fantastic in specifically shutting him down, but also the decision making up front for Spurs was generally poor. But they did have opportunities in that first half coming from the wide areas. Kraft was decent, but they got through down their left a bit, but they also got through down the right too. And if they had a more dangerous striker than Richarlison, I think they would have punished Newcastle in that first half. But the second half performance, once Nick Woltemade scored the clinching goal, as it turned out to be, I thought Spurs were embarrassingly bad. Their heads dropped. They didn't look like they had any belief or structure about them, and that allowed Newcastle to sort of see the game out in third gear. A lot of people in the Premier League outside of Newcastle also don't understand how good he is. We've spoken about him so many times. It's almost difficult to come up with new superlatives to describe him. Talked about how important his contract was. Now that's also been signed. That's incredible news. It's sort of settled everybody down, I think. But the way he reads the game, there was a moment where Spurs did get through in the second half, and Thiaw was out of position, and I think Cher was behind the play, and Tonali just calmly ran back, closed down the space, and played as the last man in the most perfect manner. That doesn't mean to say that Bruno Guimaraes. I spoke about how important, I wrote about how important he is on Saturday against Fulham with his big talismanic moment. That doesn't mean that Bruno Guimaraes is any less important. It doesn't mean that Anthony Gordon is any less important. But the structure of the team really stands with Thiaw at the back, allowing them to play that high line. That was exactly what we said that he would bring in the summer when he arrived. That was the hope, that he would allow Newcastle to play differently in defence. That's exactly what he's done. And the way he passes the ball forward, he doesn't just pass it forward to give it to Tonali or to Bruno when he plays, or to whoever, to allow them to dictate the play. He passes the ball with purpose, he passes the ball with accuracy like a midfielder, and really sets Newcastle's attacks up himself. He's almost like a quarterback in a centre back. It's very, very strange how the sort of hybrid that he is. And I think, again, both players have a lot in common. That I think a lot of people, if you listen to people at AC Milan speak about both of them, they understood how good those players were. But a lot of people clearly across Europe didn't. Newcastle managed to get a free run at Tonali, basically, and a free run at Thiaw. I mean, Thiaw nearly joined Como for half the price. And that made the 35 million look a little bit steep in the context when he arrived, but absolutely phenomenal performance once again. And it's very, very difficult to not get carried away with how good he is, because his bad performances, which one of them was kind of against Brighton, he was a bit off the pace, but he still wasn't terrible. And Newcastle have had some terrible centre-backs over the years who have given us a lot of calamitous moments. Thiaw is the complete opposite. So composed, so good on the ball, and such an important part for Newcastle defensively to step high and play with more intensity and get on teams a bit more, but also with attacks, he starts them. He's absolutely phenomenal. I think he can slot alongside any of those defenders. We haven't seen him play alongside Byrne yet fully, but he's now played with Cher, he's played obviously with Botman, and he just looks as composed and as calm as he ever does. And I think that's absolutely incredible. The issue that I had, though, was in midfield alongside Tonali, who was absolutely phenomenal, as we know. Willock and Ramsey, I don't know if this is because Willock is lacking form and fitness, and Ramsey's still getting back to his full sharpness after his injury, but the game kind of passed them by a little bit. I think the pair of them are very similar players. Do they work together? Willock was on the other side than he would prefer to be alongside Elanga. Obviously did set the goal up and did have his moments, but I think that there's big question marks about Joe Willock, whether he's ever really going to find his form at Newcastle again. I think he's a wonderful player. If you've watched my videos for long enough, you know how highly I have rated Joe Willock, and I think 2 or 3 years ago, before his injury problems, he was absolutely crucial to Newcastle's player of the season in 2022-23 when they finished 4th, in my opinion. And he's never really going to get those levels again, because I think he needs trust in himself and in his fitness levels, but that only comes from game time, and he's just so far down the pecking order, behind now Ramsey, but also probably behind Miley, behind obviously Tonali, Joelinton and Bruno. The number of games he's going to get, he needs opportunities, he needs games, but he's not going to get enough of them to really, I think, find his form again. So I think there will come a point, there was obviously a lot of talk last summer, there will come a point where he needs to be sold, I think, which is a huge shame, because I'm a huge Joe Willock fan. He's done a wonderful job at Newcastle. Obviously his initial impact when he came in on loan, those 7 goals in a row, which is a club record joint with Alan Shearer, until Alexander Isak broke it last season, and then to sort of reinvigorate himself after a difficult end to the time with Bruce, I think was really impressive. The way he did that under Eddie Howe, and Eddie Howe has really transformed a lot of players. Joe Willock doesn't really get a lot of credit because he was already one of Newcastle's better players when Howe came in, and now since he sort of dropped down the pecking order. But at his absolute zenith under Howe a few years ago, he was absolutely wonderful. Will he ever reach those levels again? I think he's still possibly that player, and he could still be that player at another club where he'll play every week, but he's just not going to play every week at Newcastle anymore, and I think there will come a time very, very soon where he's the next casualty of Newcastle's progression, of Newcastle's growth. I think the team has kind of outgrown him because of his fitness levels, and as I said, I've speculated on this, but it has been said to me before that there is a doubt about how much he trusts his own body now, and that's a massive shame. But a wonderful player on his day, and obviously I think his assist yesterday was fantastic for Woltemade. And so it was slightly disappointing to see how he performed in this game. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but I thought that there was a lot to be desired with the pair of them, and Anthony Elanga and Harvey Barnes as well. Harvey Barnes was very, very absent, and I was sat in the stands yesterday, not in the press box, and I was sat with some family friends, and one of them said Harvey Barnes missed that first chance in the opening stage where he hit the near post. If he comes off the bench, he scores that, and I think that's the difference in mentality, and that's the difference in his ability to punish defences off the bench as an impact player than when he starts. I think we've always seen this as a constant pattern in his time at Newcastle, that he's better from the bench. I understood why he started in this game. There's lots of changes needed. There was 8 changes, and I think we were talking about this block of 7 games in 22 days. I think it was a few days ago. We had said that this game was going to be the one where there would be changes. That came out, and Barnes and Elanga as well, who had a moment where he had a decent shot at Kinski, but again flattered to deceive. And my issue with Elanga, I've mentioned it before, is the structural things that he's being asked to do are not to his strengths. He goes inside, he doesn't often take his fullback on with full conviction. He doubts himself, he passes backwards, he moves backwards. It doesn't get the best out of him. But that is also exactly what Anthony Gordon was going through in his first 6 months. It does take a while to adapt to what Eddie Howe wants. I think all he needs is patience. But again, it was a frustrating performance from Anthony Elanga. As I say, all of this will come out of my player ratings. Become a patron with the link below. But a really good performance overall. I think Newcastle didn't have to be that good because Spurs dropped off in the second half. As I said, Fulham in the next round of the quarterfinals. It's getting a little bit exciting again, isn't it? I think Newcastle have got a real opportunity to close in on Wembley, especially considering that Liverpool lost last night as well, that they're out of the competition. Obviously, there's still some big clubs like Arsenal and Manchester City, and Chelsea are still in there as well, but it was a big scalp to take Spurs last night. Fulham in the next round, you've got to be very, very excited about that. And Newcastle's squad was really on show last night. 8 changes, and really, as I say, the structure being in there with Thiaw, with Tonali, and with Woltemade. A word on Aaron Ramsdale, who I thought did really, really well last night with not having to do too much. He had to keep his concentration, but when it was called upon with that save in the second half, he had no right to make that save. Absolutely wonderful. And he's done very little wrong, and you see that, you know, how better Newcastle are when he's playing the ball out from the back. He's got good confidence with the ball at his feet compared to Nick Pope, and it does make such a difference. So are we going to see a gradual transition to Ramsdale over Pope eventually, more than we've seen a very quick transition forced because Cher went out with concussion, but Thiaw took his place and he's never given it back. I think I've written about that. I think I've spoken about that as well. That is the new partnership at the back, Botman and Thiaw. But really, as I said earlier, Thiaw can play with anybody and look comfortable and can look composed, and he is absolutely fantastic. Let me know in the comment section what you think about my opinion on those 3 players. Are those 3 the linchpins for Newcastle? Again, it doesn't mean that Bruno isn't important. As I said on Saturday, as I wrote in 442, he is absolutely the talisman. He is the man that steps up and has his role. Anthony Gordon can win games by himself as well. There are other quality players around, but I think if Newcastle have Thiaw, Tonali and Woltemade on the pitch, then they've got a chance in any game because the structure and the tactical understanding of the team is there in those players. The way that Thiaw brings the ball out from the back, the way he allows Newcastle to play a higher line. Tonali just dominates the game in so many ways that you don't even see, and then Woltemade with his link-up play, linking with the wingers, linking with the midfielders, is absolutely crucial. And I think Newcastle have got to take massive confidence going into the next few games. Obviously, they play West Ham on Sunday, a crucial game. I'll be back tomorrow to preview that. Athletic Club in the Champions League, and then Brentford. This next 3 games, they've won the last 3 in all 3 in different competitions. They need to win the next 3 as well to put themselves in a really good place in the Champions League, but also get their Premier League form back on track. going into the international break with 3 wins from now would be absolutely huge, because it would change the outlook on the entire season. It will not be easy, but it's there for Newcastle to achieve. I think Newcastle are in a really good position, and I think they've got to be very confident about going further in their Carabao Cup defence as well. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow for a preview of the West Ham game. Cheers.